So it's always an awkward bit at the start, right? When we're like, I don't know if we're live or not live. So I am joined by lovely, lovely Anita Phagura. And Anita and I met about 4 to 5 possibly years ago at a networking event in our local county. We both trained with the same organisation to become ICF accredited coaches, and Anita is pretty awesome when it comes to talking about anything to do with fierce project management or inclusion, equity, equality, diversity. So if you have joined us from the morning, we kicked off the morning with a workshop with Sarah and I leading all about biases. So we kind of went through the different types of biases and we did a commitment to what action we were going to take, followed by a group coaching session, again, exploring what came up for us in that workshop, followed by a lovely, lovely panel discussion with Angel Ashcroft. And now we are ending our International Women's Day celebration with a panel discussion with Anita. So I'm going to let Anita introduce herself. If you are joining me live over on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to use the comment section there. If you are over in the Zoom room with us, again, feel free to use the chat as Anita is talking. Feel free to mute, please, and you can have your cameras off for the discussion and we will engage with you at the end if you have any questions. So over to you, Anita, who will be talking about breaking the bias through inclusive leadership. Who are you? Introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Anita Phagura, and yes, I met Rebecca 4 years ago because I just come back from maternity leave, and Rebecca was actually hosting a networking event. So that's how I entered Rebecca's world, and it was at that point. So my introduction is now a story, but at that point I was just coming, not quite leaving a career in project management because I still do project management, but I was leaving the organisation that I'd been with quite a long time, and I was exploring the idea of being an entrepreneur, and seeing what really mattered to me and what I wanted to create for my career at this point. And that's when I found Rebecca while I was going through all this change, and I started exploring, well, what am I really passionate about? And it was around gender inclusion, and just listening to Angel's stories around being an engineer and project manager in the construction world. A lot of that resonated. And so it was around my own experiences with the biases that I'd experienced in my career, but also speaking to the women around me that just really sparked this passion. So over the last 4 years, I've been taking my career in that direction, and now I describe myself as a Misfit inclusion specialist. I'm a coach, a trainer, and a consultant, and I support people who feel like they don't fit in around here to embrace their misfit as leaders. And I also support organisations and senior leadership teams and entrepreneurs as well to build inclusive businesses and inclusive projects and inclusive teams. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation today. I think International Women's Day is just a really great day to have these conversations, but let's have them all year round as well. But it just really brings it home. So I'm here for this.
I love that. And it's about having these conversations and starting them. That was kind of our thing for today. Our mission today was to start them, ignite those conversations, ignite those kind of processes where we're thinking about what we can do next to continue learning. So much to talk about. I think I'm going to go with, you were at a stage where you were considering leaving your profession. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, interesting, because actually I wasn't really considering leaving project management at this time. I was leaving my organisation, and I very much thought I was going to carry on in project management, and to an extent I still have. But it was interesting because being a project manager was part of my identity. And so when I'd come back from maternity leave, I'd then just taken my redundancy. And so now my identity was shaken because I was like, I know this is at the point I was meeting you, Rebecca. I was like, I don't have a job and I just left and I don't know quite what I'm doing next. And your event was for business women. And there was a lot of entrepreneurs around me. And I was like, oh, I'm not a real entrepreneur. So that was really interesting. So it took me a while to step into the fact that that was even an option for me. But really, I ended up, I didn't leave project management, like I've said, because I still work within the field. But I started to, again, experience bias in a different way when I was looking for a role that would work for me. And it was more challenging than I thought it should be or could be to find something that was going to be flexible and worked around the life and the career that I wanted. And the traditional project management organisations, the construction organisations, where I was looking for roles, it was more challenging than it should be. So, I mean, it wasn't impossible. I found certain roles that would kind of keep me going. But at this point, because I'd been exploring those conversations about what my values were, what was important to me, what I wanted out of my career, I saw that that was supporting the industry, but not necessarily being in it as a full-time project manager.
When you talk about challenges, because we've spoken a lot about the different types of biases that we face, what type of challenges? Is there one kind of specific example that you think sticks out to you the most?
Well, yeah, that one of them that sticks out to me is like at that point where I was coming back to work as a fairly new mum. I'd been back to work in the organisation that I took my redundancy from, but now I was back at work as a contractor. And I'd negotiated, it was challenging to find the flexible role, but I'd negotiated it before I started a role. And it was in my first week, I'd negotiated it being a 4-day role. And in my first week, when I was like, okay, my day off will be Wednesday, and I'd agreed that with the person who I was covering somebody's maternity leave, I'd agreed that. And when I was telling kind of my acting line manager, the response was, just like a passing conversation as I was out the door of, I won't be in tomorrow because that's my day off, because I work 4 days a week. And the response was, no, that's not okay. You need to change your day. It's I've got a meeting on that day. You absolutely need to be there. Reconsider your priorities. And I just was like, so kind of just taken aback by it, because I was like, this is all agreed, so what's going on? And then just over the next few days, I was having discussions with the managers in the organisation. I was really angry and I was in tears for some of this, because I was like, I've negotiated something. This is what my contract terms are. The meeting that I was told was immovable. When I looked into it, was like a couple of other people in the organisation, and when I spoke to them, I was like, do you mind if we move it? And they're like, no. I was like, and it was just this big thing to not move it. And the default assumption of the managers was, Anita, move your day. And I was like, but I have a solution that works, that doesn't need me to move my day, and it takes a village for me to arrange this day off, because it involves childcare, it involves me having thought what's best for my baby and for me, and the workload. And so absolutely, I absolutely think, yes, we have to find solutions that work for the organisation and the work as well, but this had all been considered. And it was just the default assumption of, no, Anita, you change your day, and just the bias and the challenge. And I very much, the anger and the tears was like, I really felt like at the time, it wasn't just my anger and it wasn't just my tears. It was like, how hard does it need to be for women, for mothers, and for those who want to work flexibly? And I just really felt like I was speaking up for all of those women who have been through similar things and would come after me, because I had that battle, and I won the battle. It was a lot harder than it should have been, but by me standing up for that, I was hoping that it made it easier for the next woman or person that came, or next parent, for whatever reason, needed that flexibility. Just that mindset would be a little bit shifted, that the default assumption wouldn't be how we can make it work together. No, it should be how we can make it together, rather than you change and fit to absolutely everything we need even if it's not easy for you, and even if we don't really need it.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think tears of frustration, tears of like anger and real frustration. I remember when I was teaching and my daughter was really, really unwell. I don't know if I've ever spoken to you about this. She was really unwell and she needed her inhaler, but the nursery couldn't find the consent form. So I had to leave. And the drama around me leaving, you know, so abruptly, because it had to be done now, right? If you give a child an inhaler, it has to be done now. Was just, I felt so guilty, but I shouldn't have felt that way for going to rescue my child. And same with you, you know, the hoops that we have to jump through. So what you've described is, we were talking about it in the workshop, one of the most common types of biases, which was maternal bias. And yeah, it's great that you could stand up. And I'm guessing that when you talk about being a misfit, that is leading from that. Where did the term misfit come from?
Oh, good question. So it's very much so. My business really started with the word fierce, and you know this about me. And for me, fierce means feminist, and yeah, I absolutely love my interpretation of the meaning of it, and that's how I use it. But as I was exploring, you know, other parts of my identity and other parts of my message, I started, and it was during my coach training, actually, Rebecca, that we both have a shared experience with that. But I started exploring some of my story. And one of the things that came up was this feeling of not fitting and not belonging. And that was the feeling that I was talking to. And when I started sharing my stories, around this, the message that I was really communicating was around how we can switch the message, and how actually, rather than us tell people what they need to do to fit in, how about we explore, like, what are the messages that people would have wanted to hear instead, so that they felt that they belonged. So in the experience that I gave you, like, if I'd heard from my managers that they were willing to work with me to find a solution to flexible working that worked for the organisation and worked for me, how much more supported would I have felt, and how much less of a distraction everything else would have been, and I would have been more productive at work, and I would have been less traumatized by the whole experience. So I was exploring that concept, and I asked other people to share their experiences and what they wish they heard as well. And I ran a campaign around it last summer, I think it was. And people were sharing, and so many people felt that idea of those messages we hear that we need to fit in. And so, yeah, that's where that came from. And yeah, how we can switch the message to embrace the misfit within us, and yeah, reclaim that.
I like that. That's good. It's all about switching the message, isn't it? And making sure that we can have a message that's more impactful and create that change within ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now you're switching the message and you are helping other businesses, organizations, individuals to create that culture of belonging. What would you say are your kind of key features of doing that? Like, how do you do that?
So the how is through training, and but also coaching. Like, coaching is just a really powerful tool that enables us to explore, you know, how people can actually put these things in practice. Like, a lot of people are a lot more aware, like me. Like, my awareness has increased over time as well, and I'm still a journey in progress. But a lot of people, their awareness has increased around topics of inclusion and diversity. And some of that's like, there are more conversations that are happening, which is a really great thing. But there's also a backlash to it, which is a challenging thing. We have lots of people who want to do things and want to do better, but don't necessarily know how, or they don't. And there's like a fear around the backlash as well, of getting things wrong, of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing. And absolutely, with our inclusion efforts, let's be considered and aim to do things that don't cause people harm. But and also, so how can we do that? Because if we are too scared to do it, then we end up doing nothing.
We do. We go into a panic, don't we? Into a freeze, and we don't have those conversations. I always say it's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Not being afraid and breaking through that fear. I am reading the chat. So I've got Angel that says, I can totally relate with the identity thing. And Sarah and Becca have helped with highlighting the transferable skills. So that's really lovely. Thank you. And she's asked, can I ask, Anita, have you worked in a more female dominant team before? And did you find the dynamics changed in those projects?
Interesting, because I managed, so I very much went from my career, I did a psychology degree, which was very female dominated. I came from an all-girls school, and then I went into the very male dominated industry of project management and then construction. Although I did work in local authority for a bit, but I think that was still tended to be a bit more male dominated, certainly in the leadership positions. But at one point in my, so there was a culture shock just moving from being in like very female dominated world to male dominated world. But I don't think at the time that I necessarily saw that as a challenge. Like I was just like, well, that's the way it is. And didn't necessarily see, and I'd very much been taught, particularly from going to my all-girls school, like, you can be anything in the world and there are no barriers. And I kind of thought feminism, well, I was always a feminist, but I kind of thought we were already there at equality, like in terms of jobs and careers. I was like, yeah, that's great, we're here. And then I went into this male-dominated industry, and I was like, and it took me a while to really see it. And I was like, there's still some way to go. And I'd second guess myself of like, gender is relevant around here. And the point that I actually really, really noticed it was when I became a manager of a female team. And this was really quite unheard of in the railway. And so the way I saw it, I was like, we're trailblazers. This is brilliant. And there were lots of judgments to us as a team. And you know, what would we be like? Oh, are there too many women in that team? Will they be bitchy? And will they? And then I realised that I'd learned that we earned a derogatory nickname because we were women, very gender based. And that's when I started to see, there are, even though we as a team, actually, this was like, I was really proud of how I led my team. And like I said, I saw it as trailblazing, and not that it should be unusual that we have women teams, and actually we want gender balanced teams, but actually I was seeing it as a spark of the discussion, a bit like you said, Rebecca, about actually let's spark the discussion. I was like, well, how come we don't bat an eyelid when teams are all men? And my wider team, with my engineers and my site managers and everybody else in that wider team, then actually we are very gender balanced. So I saw it as that, but then learning that we had this derogatory nickname and it being, and the judgments that were coming to us, it really then it saw me kind of really challenge my own expectations about what it meant to be a woman in the industry that I was in.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Sarah that says, I think so many of us thought that. I went to a girls' school too. We can be anything than anyone we want to be.
However, there may be some challenges along the way. Doesn't mean it's not possible, because this is my thing. Like, we can absolutely be the first. Like, it's not as easy. And an awareness of that. But we can absolutely be the first.
We can definitely be the first. So I'm going to throw something out at you, because we're both women of colour, but obviously from different heritages. We're both mothers. We were looking at like intersectionality today, and kind of obviously the different parts of our identity that can be at a disadvantage for us sometimes. Do you ever come across that working with the people that you work with? Or being, I guess, from your own experiences, have you ever had an experience of intersectional bias?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, definitely, I don't just exclusively work with women at the moment, but I do predominantly work with women. And when explore some of these topics, and sometimes we sometimes explore what are the barriers to the career success that you want. Sometimes things that are just like, I just remember one example where the lady I was coaching was like, honest, it's racism. And that just hits you hard. But then in my own experience, yeah, absolutely. Like, I very much saw there was like, now my reflections on it, I can see the intersections with me being a mum, my age at a particular time when I was kind of younger than my counterparts in a role, or the younger than the expectations, but also race. And the race one was perhaps less obvious. But I can remember a time when I had somebody I was managing who would say to me quite openly, like, I don't respect you because,
wow.
and yeah, and it was because she had a list of things. She was like, it's because you're a woman and your age, or you're about as old as I am, and yeah, and she had this list, but then she would be really pointed to say, but it's not because of your race. And I'd just be like, so is it because of my race? Like, the fact you need to mention it's not that. So yeah, there were definitely those experiences again where I would just think twice about it. And again, even in that scenario, it was actually like my first taste of coaching, and it was helping me manage that process that I was in. Which now I look back, I was like, actually, that was bullying, it was discrimination, it was prejudice. But the work organisation take on it was, well, she's just let her be, and what can you do as the manager to change? Because obviously that's an interesting power dynamic as well. And then as a coachee, I was very much looking at myself and what could I do to change? What could I do to change that situation? And taking all of the responsibility on myself. And now I look back and be like, okay, that wasn't all on me. And that wasn't, but yeah, absolutely, that wasn't all on me to have to change to battle somebody else's prejudices.
Thanks for sharing that, because one of my social posts this week was about doing the work. Like, we all need to do the work. You know, sometimes we can feel that it's our responsibility to do the work for others. So for everyone that's joining us today, thank you for being here to do the work. Mandy has said, interesting, I went to a mixed school. I wonder how that impacts us in our confidence to succeed. Yeah, I went to a mixed school too. So it'll be interesting to research that. So I'm all in for that if we want to do a study on that, guys. The power of hindsight, and we are doing the work, says Sarah. So I'm going to start wrapping it up now, because do you know what, we've had such a great discussion, and it's all about the discussion, right? Igniting the discussion. And when we speak about creating cultures of belonging in an organization and projects, your key message there is just to have those brave and courageous conversations. We've spoken about, you know, intersectional bias, we've spoken about maternal bias, we've spoken about a lot. So I guess the last and final question is to link back to the theme of International Women's Day this year, which is about breaking the bias. What do you think is one thing that we can do, and I mean as a collective, as a society, that will really have a big impact on how we can work towards breaking the bias, whatever bias that may be for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that just resonated but also kind of blew me away when I heard it was, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, society, the system isn't broken, it was built this way. And it gives me goosebumps, because it's actually sexism, racism, and ableism, and all the other ableisms are built into our society, they're built into our workplaces. That's the default. So what can we do? We really have to unpick and unlearn, and we have to do things differently, and be really critical, and let's not just accept the status quo. Let's unpick, unravel, and rebuild.
Whoa. That's definitely going to be, and I can see Sarah in the comments, because that's definitely going to be something that we're going to post after. But you're right, we did create it this way as a society, as a community, right? We started from nothing and we had to build something, and we built what we've got. So unpicking it, I like that. So Anita's Break the Bias pledge is working towards unpicking the system that we have at the moment. Thank you so much. I think that is a perfect way to end this. I am going to show your links after this, but I would love you to tell people where the best place for them to connect with you is, and on the landing page and in the emails and everything, they'll all receive your links as well. But where do you hang out the most?
You can probably find me on LinkedIn the most, and I've started to explore a little bit more of Instagram. So Fierce Project Management on Instagram, my name on LinkedIn, and then I'm also on Facebook. I probably spend way too much time on Facebook.
You probably all spend way too much time. I'm so glad you didn't say Twitter, because Sarah and I are like, whoa, when it comes to Twitter.
I've started being on Twitter, but that's not me. That's just me following and engaging, not really me posting stuff. But Twitter is the place for the world news, I think.
It is. So thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much for being in our world, in our community. I'm going to pin Sarah to the screen so she can come back to us. If anyone has any questions in the comments, I know we've been answering questions as we've been going through anyway. So let us know. If not, we will continue to share them with Anita after this. And we will continue these discussions, Anita, because it's not just about today. You know, we've started the process today. So we're going to continue that. And I know Sarah and I are both really passionate about, you know, getting more involved in the work and sharing the work and learning more as well. So over to you, Sarah.
Oh, Anita, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating. Obviously not the first time that I've heard you speak, but again, I really feel like my brain is really stimulated when I hear you speak, because you've got so much richness to offer from your experiences and from your messages. So really, that's a really, really good ending actually today for us, because we've left really kind of feeling, enriched and feeling that we've got food for thought today. So really